Hi guys, Holden was hanging out over here on the couch today, so I thought I would shoot my intro from the couch because he's got a little fan base out there. Those of you guys who don't know me, I am Mrs. H. I'm a credentialed English teacher, and along with my English teaching credential and majoring in English, I have another kind of training that isn't super common among English teachers, and that is an expository writing minor. In my expository writing classes in college, I took a series of legal writing, science writing, business writing, writing emails, journalism, which gave me a certain sense of what all students might need when they are writing in the professions, and that's usually my goal when I'm teaching English. I'm not necessarily trying to train the next Pulitzer Prize winner in fiction. I am thinking about what all students might need no matter what profession they follow. And there are certain patterns and guidelines, hey baby, there are certain patterns and guidelines that you're going to find pretty much everywhere. So I'm continuing to talk about thesis statements today because they are the single most important sentence in an essay. We train you guys to write essays because they are great foundations for the type of writing you're going to find in any profession, and that's why I put a big emphasis on essay writing and in particular the thesis. If you want to know more about thesis writing, please see my last video. I'm going to link a card up above so you can easily access it. This video is for someone who's pretty familiar with thesis writing but wants to make sure that you're getting it right, or maybe you've already written a thesis and you kind of want to run it by a couple of checkpoints to make sure that it is solid and you're ready to move on with essay writing. So let's get to the slides and then I'll check back with you at the end. So this is common issues and troubleshooting for thesis writing. I've got 6th through 10th grade writers in mind. I've also got older students who might be taking the SAT. This is going to help you on that time to writing portion. And this is meant to help you perfect the most important sentence of your essay. If you're feeling kind of lost about thesis writing in general and maybe you're not ready to troubleshoot thesis writing, what you might want to do is take a look at my earlier video about how to form a thesis and then come and watch this. That way you'll kind of be front-loaded with the knowledge, because I do reference that video pretty frequently in this video. Issue number 1, not addressing the prompt directly. So here I've got a writing prompt, and I'm using my typical spring 8th grade persuasive prompt, and that is, should colleges and employers look at our social networking profiles? Here is a sample thesis. Social media is a huge part of our everyday lives in this increasingly digital world. Couple of issues with that. I'm in the ballpark because because the prompt does ask about social networking profiles, but I'm not addressing colleges and employers, and I'm not saying whether or not they should look, nor am I giving any reasons about whether or not they should look. I'm not addressing this prompt. Now, to my young students out there, when you go into adulthood and you join a profession, one of the most frustrating things that I hear from my friends in the professional community, particularly people who work in a team and like project completion with the team, if they are asking a member of the team or another team a question about the project and its progress or what's holding us up, and they don't answer that question directly, maybe they don't know the answer and they're trying to hide it, maybe they didn't understand the question, it really holds up the project and it appears overall unprofessional. So if there is one skill you could gain from thesis writing that you could carry with you into the professional world, it is address the prompting question directly. Know what's being asked of you and answer it. Because one day you will be in a position where you will be the one asking questions and calling the shots, and you would want the people who are answering to you to be able to answer a question directly. So let me say something about this thesis. I got a little off track there talking about the professional world. This is not a thesis statement, at least not for the essay question it is prompting. It might be a thesis statement for a different question, but not for this one. However, this statement would be an excellent hook for the essay because it could be used to introduce the overall topic of social media and its relevance and kind of start broad to bring the reader down to a thesis. So while it's not a useless sentence in our essay, it just does not belong as the thesis statement. It belongs elsewhere in the introduction. To troubleshoot this thesis statement, I recommend going back to the drawing board and use the structure that I gave you guys in my previous video. And I do want to say that in that structure, I say you pick a side and you give 2 reasons. And I do know that with older students, maybe 9th and 10th graders, you want to present 3 reasons. The structure still holds with 3 reasons as well. Middle schoolers, especially if you're one of my current students, I go with 2 reasons. So to troubleshoot this, go back and restructure your thesis so it's directly answering the question. Okay, here is a very common problem, and that is being overly specific. So same prompting question, here is a thesis statement. Colleges and employers should not look at our social media profiles because college admissions officers are overly judgmental, and looking at a profile is basically stalking. Let me point out what's good about this thesis statement. First of all, it follows a nice, clear structure. As I'm reading it, I know that it's a thesis statement, and I can say it is a thesis statement. Is it a successful thesis statement? It's yet to see in the rest of the essay. Some issues that a person who has written this thesis statement is going to run into is, number 1, when they are asked to go and find quotes in their sources, they might only come across 1 quote. If any. When your thesis statement is overly specific, you're going to have a hard time finding the research to back up that specific thesis statement. The other thing about overly specific thesis statements is they're not very convincing. Imagine if the reader of this essay was a college admissions officer, and in the thesis statement, it's making a blanket pretty insulting statement about college admissions officers, making the assumption that they're all overly judgmental. Immediately your reader is unconvinced. The other thing is basically stalking. It's just the wording just feels, stalking is such a specific verb. It actually takes a couple of characteristics of an action to really call something stalking, and so it doesn't really work. The logic doesn't even play out fully with this thesis statement. Can it be revised into something more powerful? Absolutely. So here's a revised thesis, and I'll talk about what I did. Colleges and employers should not look at our social media profiles because viewer bias can lead to unfair treatment, and it is an invasion of privacy. What I did was college admissions officers, they are one set of viewers, but it doesn't take into consideration employers or anyone else who might be part of the application process and who could be carrying bias. So, and the overly judgmental, I've broadened that out to bias. So viewer bias, any viewer looking, and bias, any kind of prejudgment they might have can lead to unfair treatment. And then I changed basically stalking into something a little more broad, an invasion of privacy, because privacy is something we all value, and to broaden it out to that invasion of privacy, I think that's kind of what we might feel if someone were looking at our social media profile without us knowing. So to troubleshoot, simply use some broader wording, and if you need help, ask someone who's a little bit more experienced with writing, or think more generally, what is the topic that you're trying to talk about. Issue number 3 is the opposite issue, and that is not being specific enough. So same prompting question. I'm always going to point to the prompting question because that is really important to respond directly back. Colleges and employers should not check our social media because bias and privacy. This is basically the same thesis, just on the other side of the spectrum from the overly specific one. I've reduced my reasons down to 1 word. The problem with this being overly broad is that my reader hasn't done all the research I have, and you want your thesis statement to be convincing on its own. You want your thesis statement, if your reader doesn't read past it, at the very least, they can take into consideration the reasons and the way that you've worded it. And here, I have not done that. I haven't worded it in a way that will stick with them. Here's a revised thesis. It's the exact same one from earlier. I've changed bias down to viewer bias can lead to unfair treatment, and privacy out to an invasion of privacy. To troubleshoot this, you want to take that single word and expand it out to a fuller message about that word. Issue number 4 is not choosing a side. So this hasn't happened too much in my class, but I have had some students, I've caught them maybe midway writing the essay, and they haven't chosen a side, and they're kind of discussing the issue and all the interesting points, which makes it an informative essay. And this brings us back to issue number 1, which isn't addressing the question. The question is, should colleges and employers look? The thesis statement, colleges and employers are looking at our social networking profiles, and there are valid arguments for both sides of this debate. It doesn't answer the should part of this question, and it doesn't provide some reasons for why not. So to write a persuasive thesis, you need to choose a side. Colleges and employers should look at our social media profiles because what is posted publicly is open for all to see, and it helps protect the reputations of organizations. Again, though, by not answering the prompt directly and kind of speaking generally about the topic, this is a sentence that you don't want to just toss out. It might belong elsewhere in the introduction, and this would go really well in the bridge of an introduction. And if you aren't familiar with introduction writing, that will make more sense to you when I make a video about writing introductions. The last issue I want to talk about is multiple sentences. So I get this issue a lot with my middle school writers, and it also happened a lot when I had high school writers. Multiple sentences can be problematic when you are writing a thesis statement at this level. Before I focus on why your thesis statement should just be one sentence, I want to address my people out there who might be saying, wait, no, I've written multi-sentence thesis statements and they've been just fine. And depending on the type of writing you're doing, you might be writing about a very complex topic where you can't really fit it all into one sentence, or you might have been trying a different style of writing. I know that in my upper division courses in college and in grad school, I was writing a lot of multi-sentence thesis statements. But even when I was a freshman in college taking my general ed English classes in college, they still wanted one-sentence thesis statements. And if you're taking the SAT, you really do want to keep it together in one sentence. Let's look at this multi-sentence thesis statement. And I think as I read it out loud, you will start to kind of get the sense of, yeah, this isn't sounding quite right. Colleges and employers should not look at our social networking profiles, period. They should not be looking because it is an invasion of privacy. Also, they shouldn't look because it is outside of the fair application process. This is good because it is answering the prompt directly, and it does have your two clear reasons, but it's in that multi-sentence state. You want to bring these together into one powerful sentence. It's stylistic, it's going to be more powerful, and you want your thesis to have some punch and power. The other thing is, if I am reading this series of sentences in the mix of your overall introduction, which is multiple sentences before this, I, as your reader, might not realize I'm reading your thesis statement until about halfway through or closer to the end. So it's also functional so your reader can figure out, oh, I'm reading a thesis statement right now. So you want to bring it all together into a multi-layered sentence. It is much more powerful this way. There are sentences out there in the world and in your writing where if you state it more simply, it actually is more powerful. A thesis statement is not really one of those moments in your writing piece. So here's a revised thesis. Colleges and employers should not look at our social media profiles because it is an invasion of privacy and it goes beyond the fair application process. The because at the end of the sentence starter lets me know I've got reasons following, and then the comma and is another good way to bring in that last reason, that second reason, and keep it all together in one sentence. So there are tons more issues that might come up with thesis writing, but these are some of the most common I've come across with helping students. Please comment below with any other questions you might have about thesis writing, and I'll see if I could work it into a future video. With my next video, I'll be getting started on talking about introductions in general, but I can always circle back and help you and do my best to help you with any questions you might still have about thesis writing. All right, guys, until next time, I and this guy are saying thank you. Miss all my mountain kids, and also thank you to everyone out there who is an essential worker. If you're a student and your parent is an essential worker, please send them my thanks during this difficult time. All right, guys, don't forget to click like and subscribe, comment below with questions you might have, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.